Hello, everyone. Michael Stone here from the summit, and I have a really important message that we want to share with you. I'm with Tanaya Winder and Lyla June, who are in the summit, and we have some real concern around using the word shaman and shamanism. I've had this concern, as you know, for a number of years, and Daniel Four and I have addressed it several times, but from the perspective of two young Native American women, I really want to share why it's important to recognize the implications of using the word shamanism. Maybe we can start with you, Tanaya Winder, and hear what you have to say about this.
Yeah, thank you. For me, and I think for a lot of people, just even hearing those words, shaman and shamanism, just creates like a visceral reaction. Like it's almost just like an ugly feeling that feels out of place, like it doesn't belong. I think it's people who are healers have, sacred gifts and are chosen and selected for those things. And I see way too many people just trying to just appropriate that term or take it on themselves, like whether they're going on like a weekend retreat or a week-long retreat and just say like, hey, I'm a healer, I'm a shaman now, and not really realizing the implications of that trauma and just that, how people have done this act of being like cultural vultures to a lot of indigenous people all across the world, like coming into a community and taking something that might not be theirs to take. And a lot of things are meant to be private, a lot of things are sacred, a lot of things you don't talk about and don't share. And it almost just feels like it just feels wildly inappropriate to me and disrespectful, the way that that term is used, and the way that, like, healing is marketed for money and for profit.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much. Both of you are graduates of Stanford University, and I'm really interested in how that has affected you to go into a really a place that has institutionalized racism right in its language and in its history. And Lyla June, can you just talk a little bit about the feelings that come up, like the real stuff as somebody coming from a reservation, and all that you went through, the early trauma, and then to be in an institution like Stanford because you want to make a difference in the world?
Yeah, well, I did not actually grow up on the Navajo reservation. I grew up next to Taos Pueblo.
No.
So I don't necessarily have a reservation experience growing up, but I did grow up with the Pueblo folks and experienced a lot of the same traumas that come along with that. And going to Stanford, I think I was pretty indoctrinated and had internalized racism because I definitely was thinking about, am I going to be as smart as these kids? Did I only get in because I'm Native American? Am I going to succeed? And the system had also criminalized me that by that time. So I was like, well, do I even belong here? And so it was really hard to walk around with my head high, to be honest. And I actually almost died at Stanford. I got abused a lot in the party scene, and it was really bad. And I also broke my pelvis and my spine when I was studying abroad, and an earthquake happened. So Stanford was a very special time, very eventful, let's say. And then my junior year, I started my healing process and got sober. And that's when everything started to shift. But I'm still, I'm 30 now, still processing all of that, institutions of white supremacy and how I have internalized that. And now I'm sort of trying to unlearn everything Stanford taught me. And I now see my grandmother's Hogan as the real university that I want to go to, the place of knowledge that I want to prioritize in my life.
Yeah, so important what you're saying. I think there's a lot of recognition now, not only of individual trauma from of non-white people and the impact of colonialism, 400 years of slavery, all of this, but the cultural trauma. And I'm hoping that this is really a time of awakening. And I'm so grateful to you for bringing this message forward. And I want to make sure that we just said everything we need to say. So is there any other thing that you would like to say to people who are listening to this summit that would help them to understand that they can't possibly understand what you've been through?
Well, I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the word shamanism and shaman. I want to first acknowledge that, I don't want to judge people. And, people have come to this realm in different ways. And a lot of them are coming here because they want to be close to Creator. They want to be close to the sacred. So I just want to acknowledge that that is the original intention oftentimes when we seek out these spiritual teachings. And so I want to acknowledge that and say that that's a beautiful thing. And sometimes we can accidentally, blindly co-opt and appropriate other cultures in ways that are not respectful. And I think even though shaman doesn't necessarily mean you are doing that, so many people who use that term are doing that it has become a little bit of a connotation of the word shamanism is mixing money with ceremony, which in most Native cultures is not appropriate. We see that the medicine comes from Creator, not from us. So who are we to charge for something that isn't ours? And also really intentional about our intentions as we go into the ceremony. When we're bringing in sacred space, it has to be nothing for the self. It's for the people and for the healing of those around us. And that's when our strongest medicine comes. So not for fame, not for money. And there's also a lot of exploitation of Native people, I would say, because there's a power dynamic, right? You're perhaps a white person coming into a Native village. Perhaps you have money that they don't. Perhaps you have access to plane tickets and events and stuff that they would never have dreamed of having access to. So sometimes they'll play along with a certain paradigm or a setup that isn't actually what they want to do because of that power differential. So we have to acknowledge that if we are white folks coming into Native communities to garner spiritual teachings, there is a power differential, and we have to be very careful not to abuse that power. And also, we'll also have to think about the commodification of culture. And honestly, really, it's about the money and it's about the fame stuff that has to be divorced from the medicine for it to be powerful according to our teachings. So that's sort of what we are seeing in today's world, is a lot of misunderstandings about how to go about this in a good way. And even if for only the fact that it's an automatic trigger for Native people of like, oh, it's a shamanism, like it's almost like we think in our heads like, oh, we know what's going on there, even if we haven't really been there, because we've seen this word juxtaposed with so many of these harmful practices for so long. And so I would just really encourage people to, like you, Michael, and like Heather Ash, incredibly courageous to come forward and say, hey, let's have a conversation. I mean, that's brave. I want to commend y'all, because it's hard to look at ourselves, right? I have blind spots. Tanaya has blind spots. We all have places where we haven't fully looked yet at the truth of our actions and how we might be perpetuating harm to ourselves or others. And so it's very brave of you to look at that, and brave of all of you to watch this. I really appreciate it. And I think it's really important to give people, lastly, I'll just say, an alternative, because we can't just say, oh, don't do that, don't do that. We have to say, well, what is an alternative? And I would say that it does vary from culture to culture. If you feel as though you have received teachings from a certain culture, generally don't put it on a flyer. Don't put it on a website. Don't charge money for it. Don't use it to elevate your status in the social world. Instead, do it orally. Our teachings were oral. So person to person, face to face, bring ceremonies together by word of mouth, and share those teachings from the love of your heart, and you will be astonished what kind of medicine comes through, because it's not about you. And secondly, an alternative term, if I was going to name this summit, I might name it exploring our spiritual selves, and I would probably not include a lot of ceremony if it's recorded. As Native people, we don't record ceremony, so it's very different. And so because these worlds are so different, and yet Native cultures often referred to or invoked or even displayed in these places, it's not necessarily congruent at all. And that's because we live in a capitalistic society, right? We're trained to see things as resources, as value added. And so, it's kind of not surprising that Western culture would see these things and then turn it into this, because that's what we're trained to do, right? So we're trying to unlearn that and say, this is what this is for.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that. People forget that actually the tradition of being a shaman is being of service to the community. That's the bottom line. And I wondered if, Tanaya, do you have anything else you'd like to add to what Lyla has said?
I think Lyla hit the nail on the head. Like, I agree with everything she said, and I'm grateful for her sharing those words. And just again, just like to remember that we're all coming at this in this world from a place of learning and trying to be better human beings, try to embrace and act from a place of love. And like, I like what Lyla said at the beginning, just in acknowledging everybody's good intentions, because I think, it is hard to get called out on like something that you didn't know was maybe inappropriate or wrong. And like, and feel like that shame is usually tied to like fear, or to like these issues we have like as children about if we're a good person or bad person or unworthy. And you do that shame spiral where you start thinking like, I'm just trying to do good, I'm trying to help, like why this feels like an attack. But to just like take a breath, take a step back, and like listen and learn, which is what we're all here to do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, one last thing I'd say is, generally speaking, true medicine people, this is going to maybe be a little heavy, but don't say that they're medicine people.
Right.
That's sort of like a telltale sign that they're not, is if they're like putting on display, because that humility is one of our highest principles in our cultures, to have humility. And so anyways, for whatever that's worth.
No, it's the community that says you're a shaman, not yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's always the community that's our, person. So yeah, so much so. So really, though, I am so grateful to you to bring this to the attention of the community, to the Shift Network, and I'm just so grateful that you're willing to take the heat from your own culture, because I know you're going to get some heat for this, that you're willing to stand for the wholeness and the possibility that these kind of conversations will have, rather than taking yourself away from the fire. It just shows the strength of character and integrity that you have. And for all of us at the Shift Network, I just am so grateful, and thank you for your words today. Blessings.